little bit about some corporate finance theory, some conceptual framework. Then we will move on in the afternoon session to have some discussions on your assignment. And if there are any remaining issues to be discussed, we will try to cover them today. So let me take a start from shareholder value and shareholder wealth, because that is the first component of your task anyhow. And then we will move on to a discussion of valuation and mergers, because all of these have an impact on shareholder value. So this is what we discussed already. Actually, we started our discussion discussing shareholder value, and I showed you how shareholder value is dependent on two different variables: future sustainable cash flow per annum and the required rate of return. Required rate of return, of course, is cost of capital, and future sustainable cash flows, we said, depend on all these things. This is the discussion we had. Shareholder value depends on the two components. What is the sustainable cash flow in each year that a company can maintain, and what would be the required rate of return from present as well as potential investors? So as far as projected cash flows are concerned, how can a company maximize future sustainable cash flows? We talked a little bit about the strategic aspect of corporate finance, maximizing NPV, and positive NPV represents a surplus over required return. We will do a simple table later, as we discussed yesterday, to see how NPV adds to shareholder value. We maximize the cash flows from current business operations using all the good models that we have of financial management as well as strategic management. And Glenn Arnold suggests that if you have different strategic business units, where some business units are not giving you the required rate of return, you should take money out of them and put money in those units which are giving you good returns. One of the guys who's very famous for doing that is, of course, Jack Welch. Jack Welch created a lot of shareholder value. In fact, he was one of the first people to break a world record of creating shareholder value. He took over GE as CEO when GE had a market capitalization, that means total value of their shares, was US 12 billion. Now US 12 billion is pretty big. I mean, our Maybank is currently about 84 billion, Malaysian ringgit. Malaysian ringgit. So 12 billion US dollars would also be something like 50 something billion Malaysian ringgit. Reasonably big company. But after running it for 20 years, when he left it, the market cap had actually hit above 600 and kind of settled just below the 600 mark. So taking a company from 12 billion to 600 billion is a major track record in the stock market. I think you all might know that he passed away in April this year, not because of COVID, but because of old age. And the other person who has done this is, of course, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs and his company, Apple company, has become the world's most valuable stock. And of course, if you look at the market capitalization of the Apple group of companies now, they say it is bigger than the GDP of half the countries in the world. So that's how big and mammoth these companies can become. And both of them, Steve Jobs as well as Jack Welch, they have been practitioners of this. They have always tried to move their assets from what doesn't work to what does work. Yeah. In fact, Steve Jobs goes one step further. He says that once I have taken a project and I have found one way to do a thing, then even though you give me another 20 ways to do the same thing, I will not I will not divert my attention to that. Yeah. So this is a very good definition of focus from him. Let me share with you. Yeah. Yeah, this is what I was doing in the morning just now. I wanted this graph. Focus quotes by Steve Jobs. Let's see if it comes up. Focus. Focus quotes. Let me put here Steve Jobs. Yeah, Steve Jobs. There you go. People think that focus means saying yes to the thing you've got to focus on. But that's not what it means at all. It means saying no to 100 other good ideas that are there. You have to pick very carefully. Yeah. So that is the meaning of focus. That once you know what you want, you must know how to say no to 100 good ideas. So there have been cases where he has spent more time researching things to say no just as much as he has done to say yes. So quite an incredible life story. Yeah. And if you have time, you should read Steve Jobs. You should read Jack Welch. These are the business leaders that you read so that you can hone your own management skills. Yeah. These are people worth reading. Anyway, then we talked about risk management. We saw a little bit about overall concept of risk, individual risk, total risk is standard deviation, and we talked about beta value. Yeah, and I will see if we have time today. We can look at the different risk response measures. Yeah. The measures of standard deviation, the measures of expected value, and the measures of beta. I think any student of corporate finance should know these basic things. Yeah. Okay, back to shareholder value. Future sustainable cash flows per annum divided by required rate of return is the formula that we said works out to give you shareholder value. For example, if my future sustainable cash flows per annum, yeah, are 68,000, yeah, and if I want to discount this 68,000 with a required return, and my required return is say today is 20th, so 20%. Yeah. So when I divide something by my required rate of return, I'm actually discounting it. Yeah. And the value that I will get here will be equal to, let's see, equals 68,000 divided by 20%, and I will get 340 or 3 is it 340,000? Yeah, 340,000. Yeah. Sometimes it's difficult to see without the comma, isn't it? There you go. 340,000. Let me just keep this open. Okay. So this is how we work shareholder value. To look at the in-seed definition of shareholder value is defined as the present value of future expected cash flows from now until infinity, mathematically until infinity. Like I said, infinity means until that point in time where you can put your cash flow projections with some degree of certainty. So it's until and beyond the foreseeable future. These cash flows are discounted at a rate that reflects the risk to these cash flows. So how do we find this rate? We use a beta value to calculate the cost of capital, the required rate of return. Managers should be taught to build spreadsheets that incorporate the relevant cash flow and risk Subsequently, they should try to execute the strategy implied by the spreadsheet, and clearly this is not the same thing as maximizing short-term objectives such as profits or EPS. Yeah, so this is why I started my discussion with this paradigm, that a very basic thing that any business person would want is profits, but that is not enough. You might go on to profitability, the rate at which you make profits, but even that is not a complete analysis. You need to know how to build a cash flow profile from your business and how to discount it given individual projects and opportunities. Yeah, and shareholder wealth, therefore, is the value of a company as at any given date, and shareholder value is the potential value from future cash flows. Now, because you are going to be talking about this, you cannot just talk about, oh, shareholder wealth maximization, value maximization is a great thing, and this is how you do it. Thank you very much. Sometimes you have to look at both sides of the coin. So this is your critique. Is it possible that shareholder wealth maximization is not a very good? uh, well, according to Jack Welch himself, he said it is the dumbest idea in the world, shareholder wealth maximization. He said people's what he said was people's focus on shareholder wealth maximization is a dumb idea. Yeah, that is what he said. People's focus on shareholder wealth maximization. He said because shareholder wealth maximization is not a strategy. Yeah, if I tell you, hey, you know what you should do? How can you run your company well? You should maximize shareholder wealth. And if someone told me that, I would tell them that's a dumb idea. Why? Because you have not shown me how to maximize shareholder wealth. Yeah. So shareholder wealth is actually a result. It is just another measure. It's not a strategy which is actionable. Yeah. So that's what he meant when he said it's a dumb idea, by the way. And coming from the man who maximized shareholder wealth, how did he maximize it? Well, he did so many things. Like one of the things I told you, he moved money from negative spread units to positive spread units. He cut out companies that were not giving him the required rate of return. He sold off companies that were not giving the required rate of return. In practice, the computation of this value, point number 2, computation of this value makes shareholder focus on short-term share price rather than real value in the long term, which is true. Many times, the decisions that are taken at board level are sometimes more to prop up the share price more than anything else. Yeah, and for example, now you know that because there was some negative news related to glove manufacturers Top Glove and the gang, and Top Glove have been buying millions of shares. They have been buying back on the market the treasury shares. Yes, so now when a company buys back its own shares, listed companies with special permission from the Securities Commission, they have to give an assurance that they are liquid, that they will be able to meet all the commitments to creditors in the short to medium term. With all those commitments given and certain other criteria fulfilled, you apply to the SC, and SC will allow you to buy back your shares on the stock market. So Top Glove has been buying back the shares. Why? Because they don't want the share price to fall too much. This is just a short-term measure, a stopgap measure to prop the share price up, to keep it up. Yeah. So sometimes when we look at shareholder wealth maximization of share price, we're just looking at the next week and next month in very short term. We're not thinking about the long-term implications of it. I'm part of civil society, and I think all of us as professionals are part of civil society. If you thought about this rationally, if you thought about it as proper value creation strategy, and I'm going to talk about value creation because when you talk about value creation, there are 6 different capitals that you need to consider. But unfortunately, our minds are still focused on just the financial capital. There are 5 other capitals that we need to consider, which we will talk about this morning. And if we had considered that, then all the money that is spent in propping up the share price, that money could be spent to immediately acquire, because there's so much of a property overhang in Klang and in other places, to immediately acquire proper accommodations with nice facilities. I was amazed when I looked at Singapore. In Singapore, the places that they have for the foreign workers, first of all, they are very clean dormitories. Well, I don't like to admit this to my fellow Singaporean relatives and friends, but God knows they are very much cleaner than us. And it is well placed apartment blocks, and within the apartment blocks, they have facilities for playing games, for jogging, for exercising, for other activities. And I look at them and I say, my God, when are we going to start thinking like that? When are we going to reach there? All the money that was spent in propping up the price of Top Glove is my humble submission to you this Sunday morning. If they had used that, within 2 weeks, they could have set up all of this. Within 2 weeks. There are enough contractors who are out of job who could have done that. There is enough property that's lying vacant, ready to be bought. That money could have been bought, and it could have become a shining example of how to take care of foreign workers. Yeah. Anyway, poor and harsh business practices cause people to be fired and resources to be shifted based on pure commercial value. Why? Because we want to maximize shareholder wealth maximization. So I'm giving you the MBA angle of thinking at things. Yeah, don't just take things from the textbook. Don't just take a theory from the textbook and say this is good, because now there are other theories and other ideas and other concepts which actually work to sort of balance the whole view. Yeah, I think so, at the end of the day, the idea should be balance, isn't it? Yeah, we want to balance things off. Excessive focus on shareholder value could cause the company to deviate from the full extent of its vision and mission. Yeah, and this is true because you see, this is very typical when people prepare budgets. You know, when people prepare budgets, sadly, this is still happening. Although now I have seen in the last few years, many companies have started to align their budgets to KPIs and to the vision and mission statements. Yeah, and which is what is good, which is what needs to be done. You see, let me just show you this. If you have been in one of my finance seminars or lectures before, you might have seen this, but anyway, if you have your mission and vision, or vision and mission, it doesn't matter, it's more or less the same thing. From that, you create what we call your destination statements. Yeah, let me just put this here, or just one more. Okay, you create destination statements. Destination statements are basically long-term goals. Yeah, that is what they are. Long-term strategic goals. In key result areas. And then from there, you derive your key performance indicators. In specific areas of the business. And once you have your key performance indicators, this should be the guidelines for you to prepare annual budgets and strategic expense. Yeah. So you see, if your annual budgets fulfill the requirements of your KPIs, yeah, let's see how this one can be connected. Here, yeah. If your annual budgets are based on your KPIs, then it means you are it means that you are following a strategy that will allow you to achieve your destination statements, your long-term goals. And if you can achieve your destination statements and your long-term goals, you will therefore be able to achieve your mission and vision. Yeah, so that's the idea. It must be aligned. Yeah. I'm happy to note that many companies are doing this, but then there are many, many more who aren't. Yeah. Annual budgets must eventually be aligned to the vision and mission. Yeah. But because of this requirement to keep the shareholder value up, shareholder share price up all the time, sometimes decisions that are taken in companies, listed companies, are short term rather than long term. Yeah, and so they really deviate from the full extent of their vision and mission. And it has created several conflicts of interest between shareholder interests and other stakeholders, such as managers, employees, and business partners. You see, your assignment, part one, has also asked you, what do you think about shareholder value as opposed to stakeholder value? Yeah, so this is one of the things that you might talk about. If you talk about stakeholders such as managers, employees, business partners, government agents, distributors, your supply chain partners, all of these people, there can be conflict of interest between them. Uh, if you look at it internally, like what Jack Welch used to do, if you don't achieve the kind of returns that you want, that he wanted, he would sell the company off. So it's a bit like saying that you go to work today, and today you are working for a company that is part of the GE group. You wear the GE logo, and you get all the fancy GE corporate stuff, and you have a certain standing among your friends and in society and in family. And then suddenly GE sells that company off, and that company is taken over by another company. And when new companies are taken over, the first thing we want to do is we want to cut cost. Yeah, this is true. We want to cut cost, and that's because they want to go through again the phases, of business survival, and that is, first you survive, then you make profit, then you grow, and then you diversify or create shareholder value or become a good corporate citizen. All those things come later. Yeah. So first survival, profitability, growth. Yeah. Those are the things that you have to do. Right now, because we are coming out of COVID, I have suggested in my strategy model that I'm proposing to the world at large. I'm saying strategy, momentum, preparation for the upswing. Yeah. These are the things that
Yeah.
we need to keep. Yep.
Doctor, I'm an employee of Baker Hughes. We used to be part of GE. So, I mean, what happened was, for our case, the shares were sold in the open market, not to a particular equity fund or company itself. So that actually helped in towards the fact that there was not major drastic cost cutting done, and some of the even shares were even bought by the Baker Hughes company itself. So, I mean, I understand that there's some different sort of strategy taken over by different companies when it comes to being sold off or being divested by different by the parent companies. But in the case of Baker Hughes, I believe this is something that was not really
Was more
as
positive than negative.
yes for Baker Hughes itself, because it was sort of the fact that GE currently under current circumstances is not performing really good, especially after Jeff Immelt became the CEO, and then followed by various different CEOs being sacked as well. So, but in the sense that it was a sort of a sense of relief sometimes that GE finally separated, because it was sort of like what do you call it, a burden on Baker Hughes itself, because quite a big chunk of the profits were being absorbed by GE.
Gone back to GE. Yes, yes, always this is the case when you have multinational companies, and if your company is owned by an international conglomerate, their objective is to try to take out as much cash as possible, yeah, from the subsidiary. This is why even on our Bursa Malaysia, if you buy shares of any multinational company, their dividend payout is also very rich and healthy. So if you like high dividends, then you go and buy Carlsberg and companies like that. Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's a good sharing. Thank you. So sometimes the employees they are glad. Phew! Thank God we got rid of GE. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's another view. But in many parts of the world, they called him Neutron Jack. Because they say he's like a neutron bomb. He comes in and you don't even know when the bomb is going to go off, and next thing you know, boom, we don't have our corporate benefits anymore. Yeah, like some European companies where the executives were having benefits of first class travel, executive travel, and all that. When they got taken over by new shareholders, they immediately lost a lot of those benefits. Yeah. So okay, good. Thank you for sharing. I don't know if any one of you were in any of my classes earlier this year, because late last year I also bought into a business together with some partners, and it was an education business. It was and we one of the first things we did was that too. We let go most of the old staff, and we just kept a few of the key staff uh, to help us with the continuity, and then we brought in our own people to actually run the place. And of course, we all know after 3 months we all got whacked with COVID, but I'm here to tell you we are still standing. Yeah, we're still standing, and so far, of course, we are in the survival phase, and we are hoping that maybe after our survival phase, by next year we will reach the phase of profitability, and then beyond that we can think about growth and business development and things like that. Yeah, but we were lucky because we have an amazing group of people, and sometimes they have really worked. People are at the heart of a business, and if I have learned anything again, all over again, whatever I learned in my MBA discussions in all these years, and all the discussion that was about focus of strategy and culture and people, it is absolutely true. If you want to talk about a single business success factor, it is people and their culture. Who are the people you have? That's why I am a great admirer of people like the Good to Great Jim Collins guys and all that, because they really set a direction for us. First the who, then the what. So we really focused on the who. We got a set of good people there, and now we just decide the what, and whatever we do, they are able to carry it through. Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the sharing. Yeah. So the discussion that you might have in the first part of your assignment. Why shareholder wealth maximization? What is shareholder value? What is shareholder wealth maximization? And how you can extend it to stakeholder value management. Yeah. So when you talk about value, how do you create value? What is a good way to create value? Yeah, if you wanted to go beyond that. And I have actually got, there we go. Value creation, yeah. Let me just copy this here. I've been excitedly telling people about this value creation model. This is the model that was the integrated accounting framework committee put forward, and the way it works is this. So they said that if you want to have value creation, you see, this is a value creation model here, value creation and preservation over time. So they said the first thing you need to do is you need to recognize that the capital that you input into a business is not just financial capital. You have 6 types of capital. And what are the 6 types of capital? It's financial, manufactured, intellectual, human capital, social and relationship, and natural capital. Financial capital, of course, means the money. Yeah, the money that we put into a business. And then manufactured capital means how you use that money to buy the right set of assets. That's manufactured capital. Yeah, because you converted your money, your financial capital, you convert it into assets. We go back to the basic concept of the balance sheet, the statement of financial position. We need assets to run a business. So we take the money, equity money plus liabilities, and we convert it into assets. Yeah. Manufactured capital. How we make decisions related to manufactured capital. Answer: we should make decisions based on net present value of future cash flows from each asset. Yeah. And we'll do the maths in a while. Then we have intellectual capital. So intellectual capital here has been taken to mean the level of innovation in a company. And the proposal here, the proposition here is that every business entity needs to be innovative. Yeah, they need to innovate. They need to have different kinds of inputs coming into the business. So this is why you will find that nowadays many multinational companies go way out to get the right kind of managers, get the right kind of skills in their C group. Yeah, in their C group, they really go way out to get sometimes directors and managers from different parts of the world, because these are the big players. You know, these are the big players. Okay, so intellectual capital, financial capital, money, manufactured capital, how you make decisions to get your assets. And I'll show you some examples of Malaysian companies. I have been saying this, that by 2020, most companies will do this. And now, in fact, this is true. If you look at most listed companies in Bursa Malaysia, they will have a section where they talk about the 6 capitals. And then, of course, the human capital. Yeah. So human capital is our people. And you will remember in the balance scorecard, people is at the base. Yeah. First of all, you need people who are competent. People who are competent will drive processes in a consistent manner. And if they drive processes in a consistent manner, you will be able to give sustainable consumer service, customer service. If you give sustainable quality customer service, you will become financially a type of company that shareholders love. Yeah, maybe I can put that for you here very quickly. So first you need people. This is what balance scorecard is. Sometimes people learn balance scorecard. Do you know balance scorecard? Yeah, I know balance scorecard. So, well, how do you use it in your company? Oh, well, we have these KPI forms. We fill up these forms. Oh my God, they didn't get it right at all. Yeah, you have what we call the financial perspective. And financial perspective is basically we want to ask the question. Ivana wants to come in. Let us get Ivana in. Okay. Financial perspective means how can we build shareholder value? See, I'm talking about shareholder value, yeah, not wealth. Because shareholder wealth tends to be short term. Yeah? And I'm talking about this balanced scorecard from a corporate finance lens. Yeah, my lens is, if you talk about it from a strategy perspective, then the question you ask is, what type of company should we become so that we will be endeared to our shareholders? I'll tell you, you will be endeared to your shareholders if you build good shareholder value. That's the first perspective. Then you have the customer perspective. Yeah. So for customer perspective is basically how can we build sustainable competitive edge. Sustainable competitive. How can we build sustainable competitive edge? Yeah. That's what you want to know. Sustainable competitive edge is built when you take care of customers, both internal as well as external. People forget that. Yeah, they think taking care of customers means sell. No. How you build a sustainable competitive edge, how you want people to recommend you to others, how you want people to keep coming back to you, how you want your internal customers to feel fully satisfied so that you are one team. Yeah. Then of course you have the process perspective. Process, procedure, compliance, everything. Yeah. And here the question is, how can we ensure that our processes are clear and applied consistently? That's the process perspective. Yeah. How can we make sure that our processes are clear? And it's not that we do it once in a while when it's convenient for us to do. No, you have to do it every time. And then of course you have the employee, or let me call it people perspective. And people perspective is basically to answer the question, how can we ensure that our people are competent? Yeah. What is the meaning of competent? Competent means they have knowledge, skill, attitude of ongoing learning all the time. Yeah. Attitude, knowledge. actually attitude, skill, knowledge. In that order of importance, yeah? Skill and then knowledge. And knowledge is the last. First is positive attitude, then skill. You can do something, you can bring results, yeah? And then you know your game. Yeah. So you see, people, like I was saying just now, they are the heart of everything. People will drive processes well. If people drive processes well, then customers, both internal and external, will be well taken care of. And if they are well taken care of, then financially you should be able to build shareholder value. And this is a beautiful model actually for building shareholder value. How do you build shareholder value? How is value creation achieved? Well, firstly, the model says you must understand that there is an input of 6 capitals, and you must monitor how you are using these 6 capitals efficiently. Then you will know whether you're creating value or not. Yeah. So firstly, you have the financial capital, the manufactured capital, intellectual capital. So this is money, this is assets, this is innovation and management and leadership, all those things, yeah, intellectual. And then people, and then social and relationship. This is basically networking. Yeah, how good is your networking? Whether you like it or not, you need to have good, strong networking. You need to have good, strong collaboration. Yeah, for example, in our business, we looked around and we said, wow, the competition is so stiff. We have got big players in the same space where we are at. So who can we collaborate with? Then we looked at some big brothers. Now we are talking to some big brothers who will collaborate with us. Then we said, can we go beyond our shores? Oh, to go beyond your shores, you need to get a certain kind of compliance fulfillment. So we were working on the compliance fulfillment. Never mind if we have to do things online, but at least we finished our compliance things, and now we are ready to go overseas and into other markets. Yeah. And finally, of course, this model talks about natural capital. Natural capital, of course, means environmentally sensitive. Yeah, we must make sure whatever we do, we are keeping one eye on our carbon footprint. Yeah, that's very important. So all of these are the inputs into your business, and you will then run your business model. Yeah, this is your business model. Your business model should comprise all these inputs. These inputs will be processed through your business activities, which will result in your sales, your outputs of products and things like that. And if you're successful in these sales, your outcomes will be the profit, the market share, the growth, all of that. And all of this work within the framework, yeah, of governance. You see the circle of governance. And therefore, when you are using your inputs to work out your business activities, you need to have your budgets, of course, your strategy and resource allocation. You need to be able to balance off your risks and opportunities. Yeah. And at the bottom, you will see, let me go a bit below. So you will always therefore keep an eye on your performance reporting and what is the outlook beyond COVID-19. Yeah. So if you have done all of these things well, if you have been able to take all these inputs of 6 capitals while taking into account risks and opportunities, while taking into account your budgets that are aligned to your vision and mission, while keeping an eye on your performance measurement, performance based not on accounting profit but based on cash flows, performance based on return on total asset and not just on equity, performance, your business activities based on a good scenario building of the outlook. This is why many companies now, especially the multinational companies, they do their budgets every quarter. So they annually, many companies have now moved towards a framework where they just do CATs, the key annual targets. Yeah, we set key annual targets in key areas. This is how we want to maintain our market share. This is how we want to survive. This is what we want to do in the next 12 months. This is how probably the next 24 months will look. This is probably how the next 36 months will look. Then we break it up into quarters, what we should do each quarter. Why? Because you cannot say, never mind, we'll come back to the budget in 1 year's time. If you're still thinking about that, that means that company has not woken up yet. I mean, the things are changing by quarter. Is the vaccine available? Is the vaccine going to solve issues in our particular market? Are our customers affected? What are the new market opportunities that we can look at? All these come under the outlook, and all of these must be input into your business model. Yeah, we have a business model called the Rappaport business model. By no means a complete model, but Rappaport was one of the guys who first said that, hey guys, look, you need to look at the capital that you invest, the business activities that you have, and you also need to look at the operations. So he brought the finance and operations together in one place. Yeah, and then after that, of course, you have the business canvas model and things like that. These are the things that you will allude to when you are talking about your stakeholder value and your shareholder value, yeah, in value creation. I don't think the issue is that you don't have enough to write. The issue you will have is you don't have enough words. Yeah, usually that is the problem, because you have only 3,000 words. Yeah, and there's only so many words you can allocate. I think for this section they have allocated 20 marks. We will see later. So 20 marks means 1/5 of it, isn't it? So that's about 600 words. How much can you put in 600 words? I suggest you put things in graphs, because I know Francis likes to see information presented in the form of graphs and tables and things like that. Yeah. Don't overdo it. Yeah. Don't overkill too. So anyway, all the 6 models, go through your business model, and then what you are supposed to report each year. This is the integrated reporting framework, where the suggestion is that you should report this, what you were at the start of the reporting period, what you were at the end of the reporting period, and how you went through this process. Now, if you look at the annual reports, let me show you this, working with the Malaysian annual reports. Yeah, if you look at this, working with the Malaysian annual reports, how we're going to show this model. Okay, now you can see the full picture here. Yeah. This is the external environment, and this is how you show from year to year it goes in here. And this is value creation over time, either value creation or at least preservation, or sometimes it might be diminution. It's fine. I mean, look, because of the kind of pandemic that we have had this year, it's possible that this year the results of companies that will come out in the next few months may actually show a diminution of value, yeah, because of market conditions. So typical content of annual reports, I thought I'll do a cut and paste show this morning very quickly, just for a few minutes. So they have the typical content is what the company is about, management discussion and analysis, a strategic review. There has been now actually a move towards taking our annual reports and trying to make them 80% forward-looking, 20% historical reporting. Right now, we are at probably 30 to 40% forward-looking, and 60% is historic. Yeah, we want to change that ratio. So from the 60% historic, we want to bring that down to 20%, and 80% we want to give forward-looking information. Yeah, so strategic review, performance review, this is where they work out their ratios and graphs and things like that. Then creating sustainable value. Yeah, and this is the 6 capitals. governance, financial statements, and appendices. Yeah, another sample. So this is I chose Ajinomoto because it's all well-known companies. Yeah. So you might want to look at Ajinomoto too. They represent information in da 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 da. Now this is divisional or segmental reporting. Engaging stakeholders. Yeah, there you go. This is your business model at the heart of it. Your investors, your customers, your suppliers, your business partners, your employees. Who are these? Stakeholders, communities, government authorities, regulators, and others. So when you're doing your research for this, a good idea would be to pick up companies with annual reports that are rich with information like this. Yeah, and then you will be able to do it. Just throwing some ideas out this morning. The DG strategies, yeah. What are the DG strategies? Maxis strategies, yeah. Okay, oops, this has gone into something else. We don't want to go there. Da 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 da. Let me see. There was one more I wanted to share with you. Sources of corporate finance. Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to this a little later. I wanted to show you the 6 capitals. Let me try to find that. And in the meantime, are there any questions so far? Any questions or comments?
Doctor, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you showed us that map wherein you're showing the flow. Now you mentioned about manufacturing, financial and manufacturing, right? On the right.
Yeah.
So the manufacturing part, this one. So the manufactured part of it, the value creation from the shareholders. Am I right in understanding that manufactured includes the OPEX and the CAPEX cost, or only the CAPEX?
No, of course, CAPEX and OPEX, because CAPEX is not a standalone. Yeah, CAPEX leads the OPEX, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Both.
Because you have also human below there.
Yeah. This one is the people perspective. If you like, these are the different perspectives through which there is value creation. When we come back after our break, I will show you a few samples of how Malaysian companies have reported the 6 capitals.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, no questions. I will find the other things and you can quickly grab your cup of coffee or tea or something like that. Yeah. Okay, welcome back. No messages. Okay, that's fine. Let me start sharing my screen again. Screen. Yes. So we were talking about this value creation model, and I was looking at some examples. One of the good clear examples is from Axiata. Yeah, so let me show you this. So the model says that if you want to create value for shareholders, so this is a new model, a latest model, rather than talking about shareholder wealth, shareholder value, the basic concepts, usage of this model or discussion of this model will be good. And right now you have got good examples of this in practice, and you will be able to use this for the company that you have selected, yeah, because this is already there now. So it actually makes life a bit easier for MBA students of corporate finance. 6 capitals, how they are worked through the business model, and this business model, how it enhances the value of these 6 capitals. Yeah, so of course, depending on the environment, sometimes there will be preservation, sometimes there will be creation, or sometimes there will be diminution of value. So one good example I found was Axiata. Yeah, Axiata, I just looked up at a few of this and see. So for finance capital, what they mean by finance capital, if I can just move this up a bit, yeah. Creating value for our shareholders and other stakeholders, maximizing shareholder value, sustained long-term business growth and profitability, sustained growth and profitability, yeah. And when it comes to human capital, this is our business process. What do we mean by human capital? Developing and supporting the professional growth of our people, talent development, yeah. Intellectual capital, how we develop our intellectual capital. Well, we become a new generation, digital combination, a digital champion. Just give me a minute, the boss is calling. Let me see if I can send a message. Yeah, so intellectual capital becoming a new for them, intellectual capital for them, innovation means they want to become a new generation digital champion and differentiating themselves in the marketplace. As you know, the telco marketplace is pretty competitive, yeah. So these are the capitals. This is the value created. Then you have social and relationship capital. How are we going to work on that? Well, we are going to contribute to the development of communities within our market of operations. So, in fact, nowadays, when we talk about business strategy, and when you want to do your final paper, your capstone project, I think you should keep in mind that nowadays it is not enough to just analyze business, the sector, the industry, and stop there, because nowadays we talk about business, sector, industry, community. Yeah, because industries themselves are in different communities. So one community may have a few industries as the world becomes more integrated. Yeah. So contribution to development of communities within our market operations. And this, they have some details which I'll show you. Manufactured capital, developing regional network of tower infrastructure, how they're going to invest in their assets. And of course, natural capital, minimizing our impact on the environment. So most listed companies already doing, reporting this here. They so far the format is open. In fact, the IIRC, the Committee for Integrated Reporting, said we are not going to give you a template and ask you to fill in the blanks because strategy is different for different people. So we are just saying talk about these 6 things. These are the areas that you need to cover, and how you want to present it is up to you. So there's some very, very good presentations and very good reading um, from annual reports. Annual reports have now become a very, very good source of learning strategy as it applies in the corporate sector, of learning business as it applies in practice. So I just took one of these, social relationship capital, and to share with you how they have shown the details. So you see, social relationship capital, this is our key input. This is what we want to do, how we want to build our relationship with our stakeholder groups, our communities. These are the activities and processes that we use. So this is our input, this is the process, and therefore this is the outcome, the details, yeah, and what we are targeting for, what we want to achieve. Now I know if you are working for a slightly old-fashioned organization, some of your directors may have a shudder run down their spine. Oh, am I giving away too much information to the market, to the competition about what I'm thinking and what I'm doing? And that is always fear, isn't it? Yeah. Our mindset is like that, especially our Asian mindset is sometimes like that. But nowadays, I think the new thinking is that if I want to build my brand, if I want to show that I'm a market builder, if I want to show that I am going to be a market leader, then I should put some ideas out there. And those ideas that I put out there, I've already got my backup plan. I've already got my resources ready to roll out my plan. So if someone was to look at it and say, I want to do the same thing, they are going to find out anyway. So if they find out by reading your annual report, or they find out anyway, it might be just a few months difference, firstly. Secondly, 90% of people, businesses who think like that, don't actually go out and see what people are doing. They are not market savvy because they are inward looking. And if they are inward looking, there's a good chance that a lot of their competitors are also inward looking and they won't follow. That is why Blue Ocean strategy is so successful, because Blue Ocean strategy is where people are saying, oh, they're crazy. Yeah, this won't work. And most of the time, companies that go on Blue Ocean strategy ideas do not hit the original targets that they wanted. But because they started on a Blue Ocean strategy thinking, because they started on the journey, they end up becoming much more efficient at the end of that than they were at the start of it. Yeah. Well, there you go. So this is the value creation model. We call it the 6 capital model. Yeah. Okay, now let's get back to some technical stuff. Yes, let me finish off some theoretical discussion now. Yeah, I don't want to do any theory after lunch. Yeah? I'd rather do it now. Okay, let me just share this. You are going to also be required to talk about the different sources of finance, external sources mainly. So I will be sharing these slides with you. Yeah. How do you look at sources of finance? Sources of finance can be classified on the basis of time period, on the basis of ownership, on the basis of whether they are internal or external. Yeah. This is a pretty good one, which I picked up from Google Image, of course. Google Image is such a wonderful thing, yeah. And you have so many wonderful people on planet Earth who keep sharing these things on Google, which is true because I realize sometimes if I publish an article or something like that, it's automatically picked up by Google Scholar, it's automatically picked up by Google Image, and then presented to the world at large. Even some PowerPoints in this SharePoint and things like that, yeah. So anyway, if you are looking at the sources of finance, you can look at sources of finance on the basis of the period, on the basis of ownership, or on the basis of whether they are internal or external. Yeah. So if you're looking at the time period, you have long-term sources of money, medium-term sources of money, and short-term sources of money. Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Long-term sources of money are usually your equity shares, your retained earnings. Retained earnings represents the single most important source of finance. And retained earnings is mainly the internal finance. You can see the internal sources are the original equity plus the retained earnings. Now, when it comes to equity share capital, if you need to go back to the market to raise more equity, if it is issue of new shares, then it might be considered external. But if it is a rights issue means you issue back to the existing shareholders, then it is internal. Yeah, I'll say that again. When it comes to equity share capital, is it internal or external? Maybe one for your notes. Equity share capital is internal if it is rights issue. That means issue to your existing shareholders. And equity share capital is external if it is an issue in the open market, a new issue of shares. Yeah. But the main internal source of money is retained earnings. Your assignment will require you to talk about external sources of finance. Yeah. So anyway, coming back to this, you can classify sources of finance as long-term, medium-term, or short-term. Yeah. And so when you talk about external sources, you can include trade credit, factoring, banks, commercial. All the short-term money I told you is external. All short-term finance is usually external. In fact, almost always external. Because if it is internal, it is not going to be short-term. It is going to be there for the long term. Yeah. And short-term finance, what is the accounting name for it? Current liabilities. Short-term finance is current liabilities. So if you want to see the short-term finance, the external short-term finance in a company, go and look at what are the items in their current liabilities. That's the external short-term finance. Yeah. Then you can also talk about finances on the basis of ownership. Basically, two types of financing: shareholder financing, which we call equity, and non-shareholder financing, which we call liabilities. So liabilities represent all the borrowed funds, either they are debentures or loans from banks, loans from financial institutions, public deposit, lease financing, commercial paper. So when we are doing our assignment, this is what we're going to be looking at, isn't it? We are going to be looking in the liabilities section. When we talk about external finance, we are going to do a detailed analysis of the liabilities. Yeah. What do you think was their strategy behind building up these liabilities? Do you see a strategy in place? Do you think that strategy is a good strategy? Yeah, that kind of thing. But we'll come back to that again. So external sources can be loans from financial institutions, yeah, whether they are banks or whether they are fintech. So now the fintech companies are also making a dent into the banking sector. Banks are moving towards digital banking, and of course they are doing that because 2 years ago banks looked at fintech and said, ha, small boys, what are you going to do to my market? And now the next thing you know, that the fintech are not small boys anymore. Yeah. And now the fintech can pose a real threat to the traditional banking system, because all these companies that are currently talking about payment gateways and things like that, they all are potential full-fledged digital banks of tomorrow. And if you talk to them behind closed doors, all of them have this secret desire that one day we will be a digital bank. Yeah, and of course, the starting point is to get payment gateways, e-payments, this, that, and stuff like that. But eventually, the real business will be when these digital banks will start actually creating loan portfolios. In Singapore, I think I mentioned to you on Friday evening, there are already 3 licenses they just granted for digital banks. In Vietnam, there are also 3 licenses. In Myanmar, there is 1 license. And in Malaysia, we have a number of licenses, but I'm amazed that some of those licenses are not being used the way they're supposed to be used. Okay? We Malaysians always have a special flavor to everything we do. Yeah? If someone was to write novels, just like the Western authors write stories and novels about different aspects of business and society and things like that. If someone was to write some really interesting novels based on Malaysian scenario, they're going to be very interesting because we are really, really interesting community, as a community. Okay, anyway, a quick overview of the sources of finance here. So you have loans from banks. You might want to mention preference shares, but it will be difficult for you to find examples. Yeah, public deposits. I don't really know what public deposits means here because I copied this from somebody. You understand? Yeah, so I don't know what they mean by public deposits. Anyway, debenture, yes. Debenture or loan stock or bond. Yeah, you can include here sukuk and stuff like that. That is the Islamic bonds. Yeah.
Doctor, sorry, is public deposit referring to crowdfunding? I think.
Yeah, maybe.
Crowdfunding.
Could be. Thank you. Yeah. So public deposit, yeah. Maybe it refers to crowdfunding because yes, you get relatively small units of money coming in from so many different people. Okay, thank you.
Because it's a recent trend these days for new companies, new startups or new inventors to get crowdfunding from and then they offer their product to them way early to use.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Yeah. In fact, there's in Publica, there's this place called My Something. It's a BGBG initiative. They are basically an initiative where they provide training, technical training to people. If you want to know how to use a 3D printer, you can go there and they will teach you how to do it. You want to learn how to do say a cutting lathe, use a cutting lathe for industrial work because your work requires you to do that. You can learn that. You want to learn on how to do industrial hemming and industrial sewing or something like that. You can do that. They have this center there. And yeah, they also used crowdfunding for this purpose. So public deposits, okay, yeah, refers to that. Thank you. Then we have debentures, lease finance, lease or industrial hire purchase. Yeah. Now these are becoming relatively expensive forms of asset financing. But the good thing is because they're very structured, they're usually a bit easier to get because they're already structured. They are there. Yeah. And they may not be the cheapest source of finance, but more readily available. Commercial paper means money market, mostly money market borrowing. Yeah, so all kinds of notes that you might issue on the money market. Then trade credit. Trade credit would be letters of credit and stuff like that. And factoring, we have to a small extent factoring as well, where you can either give your invoices to public factors and all. Again, more applicable to smaller entities rather than listed companies. but listed companies would definitely have financing from financial institutions. They would definitely have loans from the bank. They would have public deposits too. They would have bonds, needless to say. They would have some asset-based financing like leases and hire purchase. They would have money market borrowings, medium-term notes and all that. Medium-term notes are very, very popular. They would have trade credit, of course, LC line, LCTR or LCPAs. So you could have bankers acceptance, all that in here. And well, maybe not factoring, yeah. Now, if this is the view from companies, this is the flip side view from banks. But because our discussion today is not about banks, we won't get into this. But I will be sharing these slides with you for your reading pleasure. Yeah, this is how we look at things.
Doctor, just a question. So you mentioned about fintech, right? So there is some terminology called as NBFCs also, right? So non-banking financial companies.
Yeah. Yes. Fintechs are part of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Fintechs are part of that. Yeah. We haven't given them the full status of banks yet. Yeah, but they will become digital banks of the future. Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the theory now. Hypotheses about the financing structures and dividends. But you cannot separate dividend debate with the capital structure debate because, like I said just now, the single most important source of finance for a company is the retained earnings. Several empirical studies have shown that when companies use money for growth, for expansion, they first dip into their retained earnings. In fact, we have a pecking order theory. And in the pecking order theory, it has been shown many times, again and again, that companies will first prefer to use their internal money before they go to external money. Then when they go for external money, they will prefer to look at private borrowings before they go to the market. And when they go to the market, they would prefer to go to the money market before they go to the stock market. So equity shares are last on the list in the pecking order theory. Yeah? Okay, I want to discuss a few hypotheses with you this morning. There's one hypothesis that suggests that profitability has a negative correlation to introduction of debt into capital structure. Now, hypothesis means intuitively what you think should work. So intuitively it is true. You know, we normally say, if I'm making a lot of money, I don't need to borrow because I have good profitability. So this is the first hypothesis. And so if you want to test this hypothesis or you want to discuss this hypothesis, well, you can look at some of the research that has been done. Corporate performance has been identified as a potential determinant of capital structure. According to pecking order theory, in the presence of asymmetric information, that means where the information known to the directors about their own company is always more than the information that's available in the market, isn't it? This is what we call the theory of information asymmetry. Actually, theories are sometimes everyday common sense concepts put into some technical jargon. That's all. Yeah. So when I talk about asymmetric information, what I'm talking about is basically the fact that people who run the business will always have more information about their business than outsiders, obviously. Yeah. So according to pecking order theory, in the presence of such a scenario, a firm will always prefer internal finance but would issue debt if internal finance would be exhausted. And therefore, if my corporate performance is good and my profits are large, then I will not really need to go for external finance or debt finance for a very long period of time or for a very high level of financing. The last alternative would be issue of new issue. Yeah. Myers, as in Prelli and Myers, prescribed a negative relation between profitability and debt. Yeah, so Prelli and Myers have also shown this to be true. Profitable firms are likely to have more retained earnings. And we looked at Gordon's model also. Successful companies do not need to depend so much on external finance. And like I told you, there have been so many studies, so much empirical evidence that points towards this. Yeah. So these are all the previous studies. They are pretty consistent with the pecking order theory. Most studies found a negative relationship between profitability and borrowing. If profitability is high, borrowing tends to be low. Yeah, and when they talk about profitability here, they use ROE, because you remember when we use the Gordon's model, growth model, we used ROE, not ROI. Yeah, so all the discussions here relate to ROE, profit available for shareholders. If profit available for shareholders is high, then with a good retentions policy, the need to borrow money will be low. Yeah, I repeat that for your notes. If the profit available for shareholders is high, with a good reinvestment or retentions policy, the need for borrowing will be low. Yeah. First hypothesis. Second hypothesis, growth opportunities positively impact the introduction of debt in capital structure. Again, intuitively, you know, you will go and borrow money if you have some specific business opportunity. If there is no opportunity, there is no incentive to borrow, isn't it? We don't borrow for the sake of borrowing. Well, in companies, if we are directors of listed companies, that's the way we should act. Yeah, we should act in a responsible way. Although I can show you hundreds of examples where that was not done, but again, this is a hypothesis. Generally speaking, logically speaking, if I have good business opportunities, if I have good growth opportunities, then my tendency to borrow will be high, because I will be hungry for funds. Firms with high growth will tend to look to external funds to fit the growth pattern. Yeah, growth is likely to put a strain on retained earnings and therefore push the firm into borrowing. Firms will look at short term, less long term for their financing needs. Like I said just now, they will first look at internal, then they will go to external. When they go to external, they rather prefer private rather than market borrowing. Even when they go to market borrowing, they'll go to money market first, which is better for short term to medium term, yeah, before they go to the stock market. Studies found growth positively related to capital structure, meaning to say that capital structure here means level of borrowing in the company's capital structure, gearing, yeah, capital structure, debt to equity. Yeah. So higher the growth potential, higher the debt equity. Growth opportunities can produce moral hazards, of course, and push firms to take risk, because when you see the opportunity, you go and borrow money. What happens is, the risk of borrowing is this: if companies have a growth projection and they think that their earnings are going to grow at a certain level, then they go and borrow money. But if the earnings don't grow at that level, or they don't grow fast enough, that means we did not meet our targets, then what happens is our earnings will not be very high, but our cost of paying interest will become very high. Now, when our earnings are not growing at a high pace, but our interest commitment goes up, it means our interest cover will become very low. And generally, the statement about this is that if your interest cover falls below 10 times, then it is considered unhealthy. If it falls below 5 times, then you are in the red zone. If your interest cover is 5 times, it means that your operating profit divided by your interest cost, yeah, your net interest cost, is 5 times. Therefore, the company is using 1/5 of their operating profit. For every $5 of operating profit, they're using $1 to pay interest. Yeah, and that is already a red zone because you're using 20% of your operating profits to just service interest alone. What about principal repayment and things like that? Yeah, so there's a moral hazard, of course. In order to mitigate this, problem growth opportunities should be financed with equity instead of debt, according to Smith and Watts, of course. But then they are professors. They know that they should know that it's easier to borrow money than to raise equity. Yeah. So the other thing is about the cost, also, isn't it? Third hypothesis: the average tax rate would have a positive impact on debt in a capital structure. This is a Modigliani and Miller theory. We'll talk about this a bit more and the assumptions. In 1958, Modigliani and Miller said, you know, we have a theory of capital structure which says that when companies introduce bonds into a capital structure, you see, when companies are first listed, you get your listing through equity shares, not bonds, obviously. You issue shares and you are therefore considered an all-equity finance company. And listed companies are considered all-equity finance if they do not have an issue of bonds. So in the stock market, in corporate finance, when we say all-equity financed, it means without the issue of bonds. They may have private borrowings, they may have borrowed tons of money from the banks, but that is not considered gearing, that is not considered leverage from a stock market perspective. From a stock market perspective, the only money that you have raised from the stock market is equity, so therefore you are an equity finance company. And of course, the return on equity will reflect the level of your personal borrowing and all that already. Yeah, so that's why we don't need to call you a leveraged company. A company becomes leveraged from a corporate finance point of view only when they have borrowed from the market. Yeah, not otherwise. So Modigliani and Miller said that the traditional view is that you have borrowed money and you bring in debt into the capital structure, and then when you bring the debt into capital structure, your overall cost of capital will go down. Let me show you. Yeah, let me just take a graph. Traditional capital structure theory. That's the one. There you go. Nice one. Yeah. These are our new whiteboards, isn't it? Yeah. There you go. It'd be a good idea to that's the ribbon. Okay, this is what we call traditional capital structure theory. A traditional capital structure theory. Traditional. E-I-T-I, isn't it? That correct? Yeah, finally got it right. So in the traditional capital structure theory, it was that if you have zero debt, financial leverage here means this is equal to debt as a proportion of equity, debt to equity. If debt to equity is 0, then you find your KE, your cost of capital, is KE. KE is K naught. Yeah, at this point, KE is K naught, because equity is the only money that you have. But as you start introducing debt finance, because you have debt finance which is usually cheaper than equity, because debt has a tax benefit, the tax rebate, which we have been calculating yesterday, yeah, because of all these reasons, we will actually be able to reduce our overall K naught. Our weighted average cost of capital, K naught, will decline initially. And it will continue to decline up to a point where the cost savings from cheaper borrowing will outweigh the higher financial risk that needs to be compensated for to the equity investors. Equity investors say, hey, wait a minute, my borrowing risk is higher now. Not only do we have business risk, we also have borrowing risk. Yeah. So because of my borrowing risk, the rate at which my KE will go up will become much faster. So sometimes the increase in KE will become greater than the cost savings of KD. So after some point, your capital structure, your weighted average cost of capital will go down and then start going up again. So finance managers for many years have been trying to find this optimal mix of capital structure, just the right amount of debentures to issue in the market that will maximize the share price, that will minimize the overall cost of capital. Yeah, WACC here is of course your K naught. Yeah. Now, Modigliani and Miller did a study in 57-58, and they said, guys, you know why you cannot find the optimal capital structure? You know why it's so difficult? Because it's not there. Yeah, they said this is not the way things work. Yeah, capital structure is not supposed to work like that. How much debentures you issue does not determine your K naught. Your K naught is already determined by the market. They said your K naught is a straight line. Let me show you what they said. Yeah, they said that K naught is something like this. Theory without tax. That was the assumption anyway. Yeah. Sorry. I wanted to just copy the image. Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Kaplan is a very good publishing company. Yeah, they publish all the notes for CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst. Yeah. Okay. So Modigliani and Miller said this is the MMPU without tax. Yeah. They said, see people, your weighted average cost of capital is already determined by the market. MMU of capital structure without tax. Some people like to call it the MM1. Yeah. Now, they said that this WACC, the cost of capital, is already determined by the market. So the moment the company issues bonds, KE will immediately jump up by a certain amount, such that whatever savings that you have from cheaper borrowing will be offset by the more expensive returns that you have to pay to equity shareholders. Because they said, see, we assume that capital markets are perfect, right? Which is what most corporate finance theory does. We should assume that investors are rational, which what most corporate finance theory does. Well, if markets are stable, and investors are rational, and there is freedom of entry and exit in the market, and transactional costs are minimal, then it doesn't matter if companies borrow more money, because if they borrow more money, their risk profile in the of the company in the market has already been set. So they said K naught is based on, according to them, K naught is based on a risk classification of the listed company, the stock market. Risk classification. K naught is based on risk classification of the listed company on the stock market, not on some arbitrary calculation that you do, a weighted average of returns on bonds and this and that. They said, therefore, capital structure has no impact on the value of a company. The value of a company is already determined by the market based on the risk classification. The value of the company is determined by the market based on its pre-existing that's the magic word, pre-existing risk profile and changes in its capital structure have no impact on K naught and value. Of course, the assumption of no tax, individuals can borrow at the same rate as companies, We'll come to that assumptions in a while. They have all these assumptions that they made. Now, when people looked at the market, they found that these guys have provided evidence that, look, this company, more or less in the same sector, one company issued bonds last year. This company does not have any issue of bonds. So one company is geared in stock market terms, geared. The other company is not geared in stock market terms. And their K naught is more or less the same. So now, of course, this attracted people's attention to whether the original theory, this theory, whether it was true or not. So does the market behave like this, or whether the market behaves like this? So many people then hypothesized that, well, the market that Modigliani and Miller observed behaved that way because most companies are already somewhere here. So you see, when they are here, if they issue a few extra bonds, they redeem the bonds, is more or less flat. So that is why a company with more gearing and less gearing, there won't be much impact or much difference between K naught. But they are not saying that. They are saying even if you have no borrowing whatsoever, your weighted average cost of capital will be the same. And your K naught really depends on your risk classification. And when people look at the market, they say, yeah, that's indeed true, because many companies actually are classified as blue chip, gilt edge companies, second liner, third liner, speculative counters. We have this kind of terminology that we use on the stock market. So probably they have a point. So but they said, look, you cannot say that there is no tax. That is not true. This is why Modigliani and Miller came back, and then they introduced this one with tax. This one with the tax. And they said, well, okay, if there is tax, then there will be an impact on the capital structure. Yeah. Then they came back with this one. These are both the sister graphs. Let me put them together. Also from Kepler, by the way. Yeah. Then they said, okay, if there is tax, then the tax saving will help you to reduce your cost of capital. So because the tax saving helps you to reduce your cost of capital, your WACC will go down with tax. Now it's KD 1 minus T. Then the value of the company will keep going up. And then people said, wait a minute, are you suggesting that the value of the company will keep going up no matter what they borrow? And Modigliani and Miller said, well, you know, in a perfect capital market, if a company reaches extreme levels of gearing, then after some time, the equity shareholders won't mind. Why? Because even if they get higher returns, they're getting higher returns from a company where they don't hold the major stake. The major stake is held by people who took the bonds. The bond holders at this level actually own more of the company. So as long as they get their high returns, they will be all right. But people say, wait a minute, isn't the risk of bankruptcy going to be very much higher? Because now at high levels of gearing, you have a very high fixed cost. Isn't that a possibility? And Modigliani and Miller said, yeah, well, that is true. So then maybe the equity shareholders will not have an expectation of such a high return. This graph will probably go down a little bit actually. Why? Because they said if there's a risk to us, there is greater risk to the people who lend money. So they will make sure that the company works well. So now, the point that we were making in the hypothesis, if I get back to the hypothesis, is that the tax rate would definitely have an impact on the company's capital structure. Although that is true, we don't necessarily agree with all the postulates that have been put forward by Modigliani and Miller. Yeah. So in 58 was the first one. 63 they made a correction to the original model. Yeah. And they said that if there is a tax saving, if there's a very generous tax saving on borrowing, then companies will want to borrow more. And in most countries around the world, interest on tax paid is a tax deductible expense. So to that extent, this hypothesis is in fact true. Fourthly, dividend payout has a positive impact on the amount of debt in capital structure. So what this hypothesis says is, if a company's dividend payment policy is strong, high, we pay out a lot of dividend. That means we have very low level of retention. So even if our ROE is high, because the reinvestment rate is low, the sustainable growth rate will be low, and therefore we will have to borrow money. Yeah, because sustainable growth rate means ability to grow based on your own money, based on retained earnings. So if dividend payout is high, retained earnings will be low, sustainable growth rate will be low, and therefore the need for debt and capital structure will be high. Yeah. And Baduris in 2002, this is a study, suggested that the dividends are signal of financial health to outsiders. So companies may like to pay high dividends, but payment of dividends decreases the amount of internal funds available and therefore the need of external financing. Yeah? Dividend policy allows for releasing of resources when the company does not have profitable projects. The good thing about this is that if you have nothing to invest for, then you can release your money back to your shareholders. So this is why sometimes, especially British companies used to do this. They used to have what they call windfall dividends. Yeah, the utility companies were very famous for that. When I was in UK, I remember the gas company that year, they made a windfall distribution of profits because they said we don't see any new investments coming, and therefore we are going to declare a huge amount of dividends. And the amount of dividends they declared was something like 50% of their current share price on the market. Yeah, So I think my landlord there, he bought it and he was really very happy. Yeah. So dividend policy allows for releasing of resources when a firm has no profitable projects and conveys information about the firm's future expectation to capital market. There's a positive relationship between payout ratio and debt. So higher the payout ratio, higher will be the level of borrowing. Positive correlation. Okay? This implies that companies who use profit to pay dividends when there are no opportunities. If these opportunities arise, then they will borrow money, because you cannot say, I pay you high dividends now, so next year, sorry, no money, we don't want to pay. That's worse. Yeah. So companies that pay high dividend tend to continue paying high dividends, and when they need money, they will actually go out and borrow it. Yeah. And this is a dividend irrelevance theory. Not so much for our interest this time. Yeah, firms who wish to maximize price would pay high dividends. This was a theory proposed by Gordon and Lindner. Again, we are going to focus more on the capital structure theory, but I put notes for both theories for you, yeah, in these slides, and then whether it is true or not that the dividend policy determines share price, yes or no. That's another issue. Yeah. So these are some of the issues related to that. Yeah, but that's another theory, which we won't worry about. So I just want to conclude by the capital structure debate. Is equity better than bonds? So when you talk about this, you might want to just address this issue. Yeah, is issuing equity better than bonds? Well, the points for this is, if company raises money through shares, then you only pay dividend if you have profit. If you don't have profit, you don't need to pay. So therefore, as a source of finance, equity is pretty good. And then there's freedom of decision making, as long as the shareholders don't suffer any dilution of control on new issues. Yeah. Profits can be retained for reinvestment at zero cost. You don't have to go and prepare a prospectus. You don't have to go and submit special documents with the Securities Commission or with the with Bursa Malaysia. Strong equity value usually translates into strong shareholder value. So if we have a very strong equity base, it means we will have strong shareholder value. Well, directly, in fact, because they have put so much money into the business. It reduces the financial risk, because if you have a lot of your equity, then you will have less borrowing. Borrowing creates financial risk. So if you have equity, then the main risk that you will be affected by will be business risk, and financial risk will be low. Yeah, you will have what some people like to say, a stronger balance sheet. Yeah. That's a very misleading term, very dubious term. Different people have different interpretation of what is a strong balance sheet. Yeah.
Sir, I've got a question.
Yep.
Do we need to consider overcapitalization in this argument?
Certainly, yeah. If you take it too far, and if you raise capital but there are no investment opportunities available, then that's an issue, yeah. And it's not so easy to give back equity, isn't it? Loans very easy to give back. Yeah, definitely. Good observation. Yeah. Well, coming to that, virtually there is no limit on how much finance that can be raised, as long as you can convince your investment banker, the underwriter, the stock market people that we want to raise 2 billion, so you raise 2 billion. Yeah. Greater equity allows for greater control, of course, by the major shareholders, and it is not really subject to financial covenants. All bonds have financial covenant. Covenant means a promise. So there might be a financial covenant as to maintain a certain level of investment, as to ensure that only a certain amount of profits can be paid out, to sometimes even ensure a certain amount of ratio is maintained and things like that. Yeah. So they can be sometimes restrictive. Sometimes these financial covenants can be negative covenants, in the sense that you cannot sell off certain assets, unless you have made proper disclosure and all that. It's a bit of an administrative pain, not a real issue actually, but an administrative pain. Yeah. Greater liquidity in the equity market allows investors greater freedom of entry and exit, because the equity market is the one that is more active, not the bond market. So therefore, people who invest with you, your shareholders, will be happy because it's easier for them to come in and go out of the market. And not only that, why do people buy shares? If they buy shares, investing shareholders like Warren Buffett, they buy shares not for dividend income, but more for capital gain. Yeah. And then risk return trade-off occur at a higher level than bonds. If a company has borrowed a lot of money, does not pay high dividends, then the share price will not be healthy. And now, even though the business might be good, there is a risk that the share price might fall to a point where a predator company might say, wow, that share price is really good and cheap. Let us do a takeover bid of the company. So that is what we call the risk-return trade-off. You must always make sure, as the board of directors of a listed company, that the returns that you provide to the providers of finance, the returns that you give to the providers of finance are sufficient enough to keep them interested, to keep them excited, to keep your share price above a certain level, so that you don't suffer the risk of your share price dipping to a point where a predator might try to take over your company. Yeah. So equity shareholders have the power to take major decisions in AGM, including removal of directors, if collectively they have more than 50% shares. Yeah.
Doctor, I have a question, quick one.
Yeah.
We've been talking about external funding, and we're talking about this, but I'm just trying to link it up with the FAM a bit here. So we were talking about liquidity ratios. How is it going to get affected by this?
Liquidity ratios are short term. Our discussion here is long term capital. This is more for gearing and all.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Liquidity is only the current assets, like cash to your current liabilities, cash and accounts receivable to current liabilities. Yeah. Okay. Well, fair question, really. Fair question. Yeah. You're welcome. Bonds are better than equity. The other side of the coin. Bonds are long-term finance, so you can use bonds just as easily as you can use equity. They can finance your long-term projects, and in fact, you can issue them to be irredeemable. Yeah, like you have ICALs here, irredeemable, convertible, underwritten loan stock. ICALs, very popular in Malaysia. Risk to the company and the shareholders is lower because before we issue that, we allow our financial performance, or at least our financial reports, to be audited by MARC or RAM, rating agency of Malaysia, and then we get a AAA rating or whatever. Bondholders would not be allowed to participate in decision making on an operational basis. So as far as management team is concerned, they are very happy. We get the money, but we don't get the interference. The potential for raising large amounts of finance is almost equivalent to equity. But because we can normally borrow at a cheaper cost, unless there's a reverse yield gap, which sometimes happens in stock markets, but not very often. So for most of the time, borrowing on bonds is a cheaper source of finance, and on top of that, the interest that we pay on bonds is also a tax deductible expense. Yeah, bond issues are more transparent. They can prove to be faster, definitely faster than an equity issue. And from the bond investor's point of view, they know that they have a fixed schedule of repayment. That's why bonds are a darling for fund managers. Yeah. Investment fund managers. It provides fixed interest, which is very useful for fund manager. provides a tax benefit to the company as interest on bonds is tax deductible, which we have talked about, and potential for capital gains is normally zero. Normally zero. But of course, if I've issued a bond at, let's say, 6% or 7%, and then after that interest rates in the market fall, then my bond will actually have capital gain, because people who want a good interest return, fund managers will go for this. They'll say, oh, the new issues they don't give that much interest. Yeah, so the ones that are already in issue that are giving a good coupon, a good contractual rate of interest, then they will get some capital gain. But we don't normally go into bonds so much for capital gain. We go into bonds for the fact that they give you fixed income. They are fixed income securities. That's their greatest benefit. Unless, of course, they are zero coupon bonds. Yeah, zero coupon bonds means very big and strong companies or government agencies can issue zero coupon bonds. Not for everybody. Yeah, only very big, strong companies who have really got a gilt edge standing, really AAA plus, yeah, standing, they are capable of doing things like this. So what will they do? They will issue these bonds maybe at 750 ringgit, 812 ringgit, 800 ringgit, yeah, something like that. They will issue these bonds, let's say at 750 ringgit, but the bond certificate is 1000 ringgit. Yeah, so what they are saying is, we won't pay you interest. They are zero coupon, so they don't pay you income. After 5 years, your 750 will become 1000. So that is the capital gain. But strictly speaking, it is not capital gain, it is just deferred interest income. So for me, bonds are not investment for capital gains. They're just an investment for fixed interest, for fixed returns. Yeah.
Doctor, I have a question. When a company issues bonds, what is the implication on the existing shareholders?
Their financial risk goes up. Their borrowing risk goes up. The risk is higher because now, out of the earnings of the company, before you can even work out profit after tax, before even paying tax, you have to pay the interest on bonds, isn't it? Yeah. So their financial risk, their borrowing risk goes up. That's the impact.
Thank you.
Welcome. I think
so
we'll take
meaning that those investors who are not interested in high risk, they will exit the market, right?
Well, yeah. Risk is actually a range, isn't it? Yeah. Those who have a higher risk appetite, companies, company management that have a higher risk appetite, they will go into the bond market. Companies that have a lower risk appetite may go into the bond market, but not so much. Yeah. So depending on how much risk appetite you have.
I mean, in terms of share price, once the company issues bonds, normally does it have a negative impact on the share price?
Share price is not dependent only on the bond issue. It's dependent on many other factors. But theoretically, yes. If there's a bond issue, share price will go down. Yeah. But then again, you remember that these are the two theories we talked about. According to the traditional theory, if the company is just started issuing bonds and they have not reached their optimal capital structure, then when they issue bonds, their share price will actually go up, because people will say, wow, they are raising money, not our money, they are using other people's money to run business, they're going to get more profits, and because they are borrowing this money in a more cost-effective way, there will be more profit available for us. So share price will actually go up. You know, as K0 goes down, the V0 goes up. But after the optimal point is reached, then K naught starts going up, then V naught goes down. So if the bond is issued beyond the optimum point, then share price will go down. So because on the stock market, the general belief is that most companies have already achieved an optimal capital structure. Not true in Malaysia, true to a large extent in New York stock market though. Then if the company has already achieved their optimal capital structure and then they issue more bonds after that, then share price will go down. If they issue bonds before the optimum capital structure is achieved, then share price will go up. That's the correlation between bond issue and share price. Yeah, make sense? Are we okay
Yes,
with that?
thank
Yeah. Shall we take a break then? Yeah, let's take a break and I see you back at 2.
Thank you.
So yeah, there's a little bit more of discussion that I have to do. I will continue with that discussion, and then I've already started talking to you about your different components of the assignment. Yeah, so a lot of our discussion today you can directly input into the assignment, but let's see how it goes. I will also talk to you a little bit about the technical aspects of risk and valuation, because the objective for your module, for me to teach you this module, is not just to teach you how to do the assignment, but to teach you corporate finance. Yeah, you have paid for the full syllabus, so I will teach you the full syllabus, and I will cover valuation and risk calculations. Will I upload this PowerPoint to Student Portal? Yes. At the end of today's discussion at 4 p.m., I will compile all this PowerPoint into one file, and the Excel will be one file, and then I will send this over to Ratna, and then you should see it in your portal either this evening or tomorrow. Yeah. All you see, whatever you see, you will get it. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Dr. I believe because the previous time every class was, end of every class there was a new file updated and got confused. So it's better for you to actually compile it all together at the end of the last day. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if we keep uploading, sometimes people are not sure, was this the day 1 file or day 2 file or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Indeed.
Good job. Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate that.
Welcome. Thank you.
you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. See you again.
Bye.
Thank you.